Hello, everybody. Welcome to another preview of our round 12 clash with the Melbourne Footy Club. I'm actually speaking to another demon because I've spoken to every Carlton supporter about this week. We can't make sense of what's happening, so maybe we can look outward and see what's happening on the other side of the fence. Now, I've got Adrian Horton with me. He's from The Debrief and also the co-founder of the Horde Network. Adrian, mate, welcome to the Blue Abroad YouTube channel.
Mate, this is big for me. I've told quite a few people about this today, that I'll be jumping on a very prestigious YouTube channel like Blue Abroad. I love your work. But in all seriousness, it's a strange situation we find ourselves in coming into this week because obviously there's a lot of darkness and gloomy skies down there at Prinny Park. But Melbourne in fourth, we're experiencing a bit of darkness suddenly. So I think if there's any supporter bases out there that have mastered the art of the darkness, I think it's our two supporter bases. We've been through the ringer, and I'm just hoping for my personal sake, Terry, that you don't pass the baton onto us on Friday night because it's got that feeling about it this week.
I found that really interesting because I spoke to Caden yesterday, and I get so engrossed in Carlton, obviously, and you with Melbourne. And I do watch the other games, but I don't engross myself in the fan base and the sentiment. And I was quite surprised to hear the sentiment around the struggle of the Ds. Because from my lens, yeah, they've lost a couple in a row, but I still have the Ds with this aura around them. Maybe they're not as invincible as what they were last year and maybe the year before, but I still have this aura around the Ds. So when I spoke to Caden and he was giving me the rundown around your situation, I was quite taken aback.
Yeah, as I said, it's a little bit weird. It's a bit odd. It just comes with the expectation now in the territory. The list is definitely in its sweet spot. We've been told that by countless media outlets and journalists, people telling us that if we don't capitalize in the next 2, 3, 4 years and win another flag, and especially win one at the home of footy in front of the Demons faithful, then it'll feel like a bit of a failure. I've bought into that sentiment. I agree for the most part. What I don't agree with is I still think there's a long, long way to play out. Melbourne certainly aren't at their best. We haven't hit our straps. But the reality is we sit in fourth. We've still got a good platform. If we were to win this week, then it sets it up for a massive King's Birthday top four clash against the Filth. I think the Blues fans will like me coining that one. Yeah. But yeah, it's odd. Like I've had a lot of messages throughout this week. I know, you feel like somewhat of a therapist yourself at times, Terry, particularly in the last month, trying to counsel Blues fans. I've felt a similar thing, talking to a few close friends. Melbourne supporters can't shake that overriding feeling of pain and misery, sadness, darkness, because we've experienced it for so long. There were the older gen that had a 23-year finals exodus from 1965 to 1987. They felt a lot of pain. My generation, we were out of finals for 12 years. We hit rock bottom. We were winning 2 games a year there for a while, as everyone knows. So as much as we loved the 2021 grand final, and it means a hell of a lot to us, I think the sheer fact that we weren't there to witness it, we haven't won one at the MCG since 1964, it's still there. And I think that's where the angst and the pain and the potential downfall that people might foresee for Melbourne this year, that's what's really hurting us. And that's what's really bugging us at the moment. But on my show on Monday, I was trying to preach a bit of calmness, and just remind everyone that we're only nearly halfway through this season, in probably a similar way to what you're trying to do at the moment with the Carlton faithful. There's still a long, long way to go.
There is a long way to go. And sometimes, well, maybe most of the time, we try and make a claim on what the season means based off what happened in round 8 or 9 or 10 and what it's going to mean. Now, I don't know if that's a coping mechanism so people can feel a certainty within their expectations or a management of their expectations. I'm not sure what it is, but week to week, we try to paint the picture of what the whole picture of the year will mean based off, individual games or a 3-week patch, which is a challenge. I get sucked into it as well. I definitely had my gut check. The one beautiful thing I'll say about losing a lot is you constantly look inward and you reflect, and in that comes growth, I think.
You think? I love that
I
you
hope.
think. Yeah, it's tricky. I just for what it's worth, and I've said this before on the show, and I extend this to some of my Blues friends and even my next door neighbour who's a massive Carlton fan. I was watching the game with him last week. And again, I was counselling him through it. I do feel a certain degree of sympathy for what you're currently going through and the way that all the knives have come out and the media is after you, because we've been there. We've been through this. We've done this before. It's a horrible place to be. And it's certainly a horrible place to be when you have a certain amount of expectation coming into a season. But in saying that, I think the one great thing about the Carlton Football Club is your fans are a constant. They'll never leave. They'll always be there. So when it happens, when it eventually turns, because it will one day, it's a club that deserves, well, its fans deserve to experience that journey and that ride when it does become somewhat successful and you enter back into finals and you start winning finals. So, yeah, my relationship with Carlton is really eerie and quite strange because it mirrors a lot of what I've actually been through myself as a Melbourne supporter. So there's no animosity towards them. There never really has been. And you've, unfortunately, and it sounds stupid, but you've just got to stay the course, I guess.
Yeah. Spoken like a classy Melbourne supporter, like the rest of you, mate.
Are we? Yeah, I'd like to think we are. I'd like to think that we wouldn't stoop to the levels of the filth and Collingwood supporters, and maybe we'll even throw Richmond in there as well.
We'll throw Richmond in there for sure. And the Bombers.
Yeah, don't get me started. Don't get me started on the Bombers, honestly. Yeah, that's an interesting one for me. My in-laws go for Essendon, so yeah, that was almost a sticking point. Do I actually marry into this scenario or not? And I did. So shame on me.
Mate. Yeah. I learned something about Melbourne this week with regards to Simon Goodwin and his philosophy around, showing respect to the opposition every week and really honing in on that. And that's been a constant. What's your take on that? How do you feel about that? Because Caden felt or spoke around how he wasn't sure if it's almost giving the opposition too much respect and wanting to, for lack of a better phrase, put the foot on the throat for some teams.
Yeah, I spoke to Caden about this as well. Just the two of us over text. He sent me a few examples from different players, from Petrarca, Gawn, some of our senior leaders. We know that Simon Goodwin doesn't give too much away. He's almost a little bit robotic in his press conferences. Probably doesn't say the things that Melbourne supporters would like him to. I tend to agree with Caden. I actually think that Melbourne need to be a little bit more ruthless in their mindset. I do like the respect aspect and the key messaging that comes out of senior leaders and coaches and whatnot, and that's great. But I would like to hear some not necessarily arrogance, but I'd like to hear some more ruthlessness that comes out of their mouths during the week about how they believe that their best is more than good enough to beat the opposition. Typically, they focus way too much on some of the traits of the opposition, constantly talking them up to the point where I've heard them talking up the likes of a Hawthorn and a North Melbourne, and no disrespect. But I think that key messaging sometimes can filter through to the playing group where they're playing a little bit of nice footy at times. I'm starting to see that way too much. Even last week with Luke Jackson, there were times where I was watching and some of the players were like having a bit of a joke with him and giggling with him out on the ground. And I thought, even though I love the guy and he's a premiership hero, and I got shit canned actually for telling people that we should applaud his first touch, which I thought would be a classy thing to do, and then we move on. I didn't like seeing that. And there was an example against Port Adelaide as well where Max Gawn got targeted, and Port Adelaide have done this in the past with him. And not one senior player in the vicinity, Stephen May, Jake Lever, and Angus Brayshaw, even a Jack Viney, who is an absolute wrecking ball, none of them came to his aid when he was getting some of the attention that he got. And it comes back to this idea that Melbourne are a little bit too nice as a team. So, yes, it's all good and well being respectful. I think that's a great thing. But when you go out into the footy field, I'd love us to have a little bit more mongrel and get in the faces of the opposition a little bit more. Kills me to say it, but the filth do it, and they fly the flag. And they, there's a number of different players within that team that certainly divide opinion, like Braden Maynard being one of them, who certainly pisses off a lot of supporters. But I would love to see us have a little bit of nastiness and a bit of edge to us. I think it makes a big, big difference. So I think Caden's right in terms of the messaging. It could have an indirect effect on the way that the players actually play the game.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. How do you summarize? I mean, you did touch on it earlier that it's still early in the season and you don't want to jump to conclusions, but how do you summarize the way Melbourne play compared to when they're at their best?
Melbourne changed their style in the preseason. We'd been crying out for them to get a little bit more speed on the ball, take those angles from, say, D50 exit, go through the corridor, all this modern day footy that we're seeing now, which is obviously bearing fruit and it's effective. We started doing that in the early parts of the season. So against Bulldogs in round one, we started to see a little bit more dare, a little bit more run and carry. And we were stoked. We were like, thank God, Melbourne have sorted it out. Because in 2022, I think one of the biggest reasons why we came unstuck is because we had a very slow, laborious method, almost in the way that Geelong never were able to capitalise on that decade of dominance. They made constant prelims. They made a grand final on a couple of occasions. But their biggest issue was the fact that they were trying that short kick possession game. And it was very easy for turnover teams to pick it apart. So we thought, okay, we're not going to see that long down the line, slow ball movement, easy for the opposition to set up behind the ball. We did that for probably the first, I would say, month, and then you could probably mount a case that we did it pretty well on Anzac Eve night against Richmond, although they are a turnover team as well, so very similar styles. And then we've gone away from it. So we've actually reverted back to the slow ball movement that we saw in 2022. We've gone back to the hack kicking, long bombing into the forward 50, hoping for a contest, hoping for crummers, and manufacturing goals in a really, really ugly way. Such an ugly way. There's not a lot of nuance, there's not a lot of method to it. And it's really frustrating to see. And I think our biggest hope as a supporter base is that we actually get back to that daring, fast footy that we saw earlier in the year, because we can certainly play that way. We were the highest scoring team all the way through that period. We had a great spread as well. I would hope to think that the coaching staff have identified that, because on one hand, earlier in the season, we've got a Melbourne that we believe has changed. And not only have they changed, but they've actually changed with the times of how modern footy is played and how you win games in 2023 and 2022. And yet, for some unknown reason, they've decided to go back to old habits in the last few games. And it's frustrating. So that's the big watch list for this week for Melbourne. Can they get their mojo back, attack, be brave, and play some risky footy.
I was going to ask you of your perception of Carlton from the other side of the fence. You, in probably 85% of what you just said, have summarized how I would explain what we're doing. It's a bit slower, not as much energy, not as much nuance, moving the ball inside 50. It's a bit long and high in hope. We've got, a couple of good forwards down there, Coleman medalists, but it sounds the same or not dissimilar.
I agree. I was having that very chat with my next door neighbour on Friday when we're watching together. I think the lowering of eyes is one of the most frustrating things as a football fan. So when you can see that 15, or not the 15, even the 20 to 30 meter kick from an angle going inside 50, and yet they wheel around and bomb it in high and long, it allows intercept defenders to get a knuckle in. Nothing kills me more, like honestly. And we saw it time and time again on Friday when you were playing the Swannies. And then it was a carbon copy on Saturday with Melbourne. We had so much forward half territory in the same way that you did. I actually thought your defense set up really well. I thought they were playing a ripping game. Same thing with us. Like I couldn't really fault our defense and the way that they were repelling and were getting possession back. But where, as a team and as a collective, where you really hurt yourself is the way that you use the footy going inside 50. It's an obvious one. It's a clear one for footy fans. Like you don't have to be a tactical genius to understand that that's a fundamental that you have to get absolutely right. And yeah, I think for Carlton, that's a part of it. The other part of it for me clearly was his goal kicking in the last few weeks. Just finishing off your work. I really do believe that if you were able to put the score that you probably should have in that third quarter, it may have been a difficult task for Sydney to get back, albeit some of the injuries mounted up and you were down a few rotations on the bench. So, I mean, Carlton's a funny one. Like, I still believe that the talent base is there. I still believe that the structure and the spine of the team is really strong. But it just feels to me like a complete and utter lack of confidence when you get to your forward half and a lack of killer instinct. And then when some of your big blokes start missing, I think it just becomes infectious. And that feeling of losing and that resignation then seeps throughout the rest of the team. And unfortunately, in a team sport, it means that all your other colleagues and players can start to waver and drop their bundle. So it must be incredibly frustrating to watch for you guys, because I think if you start well and you're a little bit more clinical, I really do believe Carlton are a massive confidence side. They'll get a lot of belief out of kicking straight, and then things can potentially flow from there. But just don't bomb it in high and long. Like, just look for the angles, look for the short ones inside 50. Yeah, it's a similar story for both teams at the moment.
Yeah. I know that it happened in Perth when you won the flag, and I do understand that. But at the end of the day, it happened. You saw the light at the end of the tunnel. I think it would be a bit too simple to say what was the one thing that led to the success, because there were the failures along the way that compounded, and there were all sorts of lessons. What's your take on how you got through to the other end and actually you rose to the occasion and won the ultimate? What was the story from your lens?
The story for us starts all the way back in 2013 off the top of my head, or 12 even, when we recruited Peter Jackson to be our CEO. We then got Paul Roos in. We then got a lot of other administrators in to help the club. We kind of gutted the joint, to be honest, and then started again. A lot of it was built off defense in the early beginnings with Paul Roos, and then you started to see him layer in some of those attacking elements to our game. I think a big part of where we are now comes from the fact that we were able to make finals and win some finals. I think that was the biggest pressure release valve on the club that I've ever seen. I know that you guys are still waiting. You might have to wait another year for that. I I hope it's only next year if you have to wait this year, if I'm being honest. I just can't imagine how your fans would cope with that. But I think for me, like 2018 was probably the most pivotal year that doesn't get spoken about enough. It was a bit of a struggle to get there. And if you recall, in 2017, sorry to bring up bad memories, we lost to Carlton in the very final round. We lost to Collingwood in the very final round of that season. They put out what was virtually a VFL side. They had so many key players missing. We bottled it. All we had to do was win. And then West Coast were able to leapfrog us on that Sunday evening and make the finals. That was crushing. That was devastating. We came back the next year. We eventually got there in the end. And we're just riding this enormous wave in finals. We won those 2 finals. We beat Geelong in the elimination. We beat Hawthorn in the semi-final. We got to the prelim. We played the Eagles over in Perth. I was there, and we hadn't kicked a goal to halftime, which was fun. But in the wash-up, like that year did so much more for us than we could probably have ever expected, because we're able to see that there was a genuine light at the end of the tunnel. In my mind, and in hindsight, it didn't really matter that we dropped off in 2019, finished 17th because we ended up getting Cozzy Pickett, which was nice. And then in 2020, it was a bit of a strange COVID scenario. We finished 9th. But I really do hark back to the 2018 final series as a bit of a platform for us, that the group and all the main players or all the key players in the group could do it. They could compete with the best. And I think without that experience, I can't imagine that 2021 would actually be achievable. And then when it all came together, I mean, we were playing a defensive brand that no one else could really pick apart. May and Lever had a field day. Gorm was dropping behind the ball. It was all about defense first, absorbing and hitting on the counter attack, so to speak. So teams have found us out now. We can't keep playing that style. We need to adapt. It's pretty obvious our record since the second half of last year isn't quite up to it, because everyone's done a number and everyone's gone to town on how you can beat Melbourne. So yeah, it's critical for Melbourne at the moment. It's crucial for the coaches to stop being so stubborn and understand that as one of the benchmarks in the competition, everyone's going to study you to the nth degree. They have, and we need to adapt. And if we don't adapt and we continue to play the same style we might finish 4th, we might finish 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, but I can't see us going deep in September if we don't change our mode, because our mode is beatable every week at the moment. But yeah, that's my take on now, and that's my take on why I think we ended up getting to where we got to. So 2018 was pivotal to 2021.
Okay. What's your take on Friday? What's going to happen? What does it look like? What's the expectation from your end?
I've got a few of my closest friends, massive Ds. I'm going to name and shame them. A couple of blokes on the podcast that I do on a Thursday night: Tom Marcazzani, Matt Adams, Ben Corcoran.
The boys, shout out.
The boys, also known as Nuggets. They're scared about going on Friday because we can't shake this horrible feeling that Melbourne are starting to spiral out of control just because of previous years, previous decades, what we've had to live through. The very thought for them of losing to Carlton, given your current state of affairs, I believe you're going to have a lot of players out, maybe something upward of 6 forced changes, means that I don't think they can be stuffed going in there just to face what that potential reality looks like. For what it's worth, I'm fairly confident that we'll get a response after having a really poor fortnight. I think Carlton are going to come out breathing fire. Like I think Cripper's Instagram post will rally everyone. Might get an extra 5,000 Carlton fans to the game. You never know. But I love Cripper's fighting words, and he's right. Like, don't criticize me. The guy's an absolute legend. He bleeds for that club. Like, he loves Carlton. He could have easily have left at various times, and he hasn't. He's a Brownlow medalist. He's an absolute star, and I think, given his leadership, I really do believe that you guys will come out. You'll breathe some fire. I reckon it'll be really close for the first half. You might even go in up at half time. I'd like to think that Melbourne's polish, like a little bit more polish than Carlton at the moment in terms of skill execution, and just the fact that you're a few key troops down, I think that means that we should have enough to get over the line. But at this point in time, I think the big expectation for any Melbourne supporter is we just want 4 points. We want to know what winning feels like again. We're so spoiled. We're 7-4. We've lost a couple of games to two very good teams in Port and Freo, who are ever improving and they've got their mojo back. And we've lost them by a whisker, by a bee's dick. And we're all acting like the world's imploding. We need to get a grip. And all we need is the 4 points on Friday night. We don't care how they come or by what margin. And we can't get greedy. And hopefully that's the feeling and the outcome for us. And hopefully for your sake, it's not another Cozzy Pickett moment like last year. Because I watched your reaction video actually, Terry, to that one. Not out of, not out of spite to see, to rub it in or anything. I genuinely felt that emotion and that feeling of being, 11 seconds from finals. And I spoke to a lot of Carlton mates in the aftermath. And again, it was counselling. I was like, I was almost apologetic, even though there was a part of me that was obviously giddy about the circumstances. So yeah, I'll take a routine 2-3 goal win without the Cozzy highlight or the Cozzy moment at the end. There you go.
I like it. Fair. Yeah, I echo that with, we just need to win just to get something going. The supporters, we haven't really been able to jump on something yet. We won a couple of games early in the season and they were a bit scrappy, but nonetheless, you take the wins as you get them. So you don't want to peak too early. And then I don't think anybody saw the next, what would happen for 6 of the next 7 games that leads us to this point. So we're not different in that. We just need a pressure release, just a different feeling throughout the week. But when that comes is not in the fans' control, unfortunately. So I'm ready for anything. That's for sure. I'm ready for a win. We all know that, but I'm also ready for a loss, and whatever happens. You just kind of got to keep going. And like you said, I mean, you've seen the light at the end of the tunnel. We're kind of just waiting to see a bit more of that light, and we just got to hold firm until it comes. Hopefully, it comes.
Yeah, it'll come. It could be anything. Friday, it could honestly be anything. Melbourne, we're out of form. Our game plan's not in shape. We've got stars down. We've got our role players that we rely on heavily in our forward half. They're down. It's like Neil Bullen, Spargo, Pickett, even Fritsch to a certain degree. Kate Chandler, who started off really well this year. Jake Lever's not playing well. We need to get another defender into that back line. Otherwise, he'll have to take one of Harry or Charlie, and that's a nightmare matchup for us. So, yeah, it could literally be anything on Friday. Like, I don't think many Melbourne supporters are actually going into this one with their tails up, hugely optimistic, thinking it's going to be a thumping. No way, no hope in hell. I reckon this will be a tough battle. It'll be a grind like it was last year. I'm really looking forward to it because it's Friday night footy. But the outcome for either team, I think, will mean that if it's Carlton that get up, it's a pressure release valve. The media down at Prinny Park will piss off for a bit. And you'll literally be handing the mantle over to Melbourne for the week. And they'll be on our case and on our back. That's where it's got to. So it's a very interesting scenario.
Yeah, wow. Okay. I'm excited. I'm always excited when it gets to Wednesday, Thursday. So we'll see how it plays out. I want to ask you also, you've been in the content game for a while now. This is your first time here on the channel. What's the story? How have you observed the journey? What's it been like for you?
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, I started it out purely as like a passion project. Let's see what we can do with it. I'd been working in podcasting for a few years before starting the debrief, so I knew a bit about the game. I didn't expect the reaction that we got in the first year when we launched it in 2017. People got around it really hard, which was great. The whole purpose of it was purely to just give the fans more of a voice. I always felt like there was a bit of a disconnect between club and supporter. And it was just about conveying thoughts, feelings, and emotions. That was it. It was doing what we do every single frigging day now on WhatsApp threads, talking to our mates about our beloved Melbourne Football Club. And we were just transferring that behind a microphone in a very relaxed, pub styled way. And then, yeah, it's just gathered a lot of momentum from there. We're in a nice, shiny studio at Castaway Studios. A shout out to Derek down there in Collingwood. Yep, we recorded out of the suburb of the filth, believe it or not. And we've just progressed it year on year. It's gotten bigger. The numbers have increased every single year. And I mean, I just get such a kick out of talking about something that I probably shouldn't obsess over as much as I do. But the journey's been amazing. It's been amazing to meet so many beautiful Melbourne supporters as well. It's been amazing to make some incredible business connections off the back of it. That's probably something I didn't expect. And there's just something to be said for listening to a podcast. It's a very intimate medium, a very engrossing medium. I work in the space full time as well. I'm very lucky and fortunate to be working in something that, again, I'm very passionate about. But the debrief has never really been about me personally. It's about the fans. We speak on behalf of the fans. We feel like, for the most part, we're conveying what they're feeling at the time. We bring them into the conversation as much as we can. And yeah, we get a lot of plaudits and a lot of love for that. And long may it continue. But it's been an awesome journey. Like, I'm really glad that after a beer in Edinburgh Gardens in North Fitzroy with a good mate who convinced me to get it up and running, I heeded his advice and I took it on. And yeah, we're here now just enjoying 2 podcasts a week, and just getting everything off our chest. And it's always incredibly therapeutic after every single podcast. I love that feeling of just getting it all out there. And I'm sure that you feel exactly the same, Terry. Like, sometimes you can bottle it up and you're like, oh shit, I can't wait to get to that review show. Can't wait to get to that preview show, and just tell everyone what's going on inside my brain about my football club. And that's the beauty of it as well. I think mentally it's a very good thing for you.
Yep. No doubt. I mean, even the worst of losses, round 22 last year, round 23 last year, no doubt doing those fan cams afterwards. Round 22 was okay because there was still hope for the next week. And it was kind of like, oh, it's all written in the stars. We've just got to be Collingwood next week. But round 23 was obviously the end. There's no doubt after a session like that, you just, it's, you lay it out and it's really become a management cycle of emotions and just trying to navigate and just help get us through to the next week, and the balance right now, because there's a responsibility now, with great power and numbers and viewership, like it's, your words have more weight. So there's that responsibility to make sure that, you're still supporting the club and not adding fuel to the fire that the mainstream will already put on us. And that's been the biggest challenge, I think, for myself and for the channel over the last few weeks. And that comes from expectation and all of that. And, the players are putting expectations on themselves, and that can't be lost in translation. And sometimes we can misinterpret losses and miskicking and poor decision-making as a lack of care, which is wrong. So I try to balance the fact that, you got to get it out, but we also don't want to, be a detriment, and we don't want to add to the negativity that's already there. And that's something that's come up for me, lately. And I've really done some soul searching of how to do that. And what's the solution? Well, I think it's something around just being a little bit more in control of one's emotions. And that's tough, but it's got to be done.
Yeah, I agree. We were at a similar juncture on Saturday night, people losing their minds, very angry, very upset. This is not the top 2, top 4 team that we've been told that Melbourne are. And similar to yourself, like you're experiencing a downward period at the moment, a malaise, so to speak. There's a lot of infighting on socials between people. It's never nice to see, but that's just the world that we live in now. But you got to strike that balance. You got to be cool, calm, collected. I mean, there's probably a number of things that I could think of at the time that I'd probably love to express, but I don't, purely because I know that I could add a little bit of fuel to the fire, as you said, and it's probably not worth it. Like if you've got the opportunity to take the heat off the club, and not say something outlandish and not say something that might add to the vitriol, you're probably better off taking that approach. And I think you strike the balance really, really well. I think you're doing a cracking job under the circumstances and where the club finds itself. But I've always gone by this adage, and my granddad used to say this to me all the time: it's never quite as bad as it seems. And I think success is, I wouldn't say it's just around the corner, but I do believe that it's a little bit closer than you would believe. So as I said before, you got to stick fat, you got to stay the course, because when you enjoy what it's like to be successful after everything that you've gone through, it's going to be a hell of a lot sweeter if you know deep down as a supporter that your faith never wavered, probably when you thought that you wanted to throw the towel in. So yeah, striking balance is a very important thing.
Yeah, well said. Well, mate, this has been awesome. Thank you for your time. The most valuable asset anyone has. So I really appreciate you jumping on here with me.
No, I appreciate it, mate. I'm about to put the runners on and jog around Prinny Park, and if I see a few vultures down there, aka the media, with their microphones out, I'll tell them to piss off and leave the Blueies alone. Yeah, I'll flick them away for you. But all the best on Friday. I think it's going to be a classic. I think it's going to be tight. And yeah, I mean, may the best team win, but go D's.
Go Blues. See you, mate.